Hello and welcome to Tables of Content. Pull up a seat, join us. We have room for everyone. My name is Darin M. Bush. I'm the founder and executive producer of Tables of Content. You've joined us for a Zeroversary movie watch party. This is the after panel in a two-part series called Thing 1, Thing 2, and Thing 3. And I think I've said this before, but I'm not referring to my co-panelists here. I'll explain exactly what a Zeroversary movie watch party is in just a moment. But first, I'd like you to meet our panelists who may or may not be who they say they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the light side of the force and ask Jessa to introduce herself to our fabulous audience.
I'm Jessa Philips. I am the editor-in-chief and broadcast director of Good to Be a Geek. We talk about all things nerdy. Specifically, I tend to focus on, feminism and race relations as they relate to pop culture.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessa. And then moving over to the darkness, I'm going to ask this lovely person, Aubrey Spivey, to introduce herself to our audience.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Spivey. I'm a young adult author and book editor.
Excellent. And last is Mr. Gary Mitchel. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Gary Mitchell. I am a writer, reviewer, podcaster. I am the co-host of the DragonCon American Sci-Fi Classics track, which you can find all of these people usually at come Labor Day. And also, speaking of Good to Be a Geek, I am associated with that because I am associated with her, and we have a horror podcast that is coming together, coming soon to be Good to Be a Geek.
Excellent. Thank you, folks. And just in case you're wondering, I'm Darin M. Bush. I'm a science fiction and fantasy short story author. I've got some stories up on the Kindle if you're interested. I also create a lot of content and do a lot of panels for local Atlanta sci-fi and fantasy conventions, especially DragonCon, where I'm going to be working for Gary, and also at places like Conjuration and Monsterama, and JordanCon is coming up next month, which will be also a lot of fun and interesting. All right, so let's just dive right into this monstrosity, which is that if you will remember from the before panel, the three movies that we picked are The Thing from Another World from 1951. It's the 70th anniversary, was in COVID terms this year in COVID terms. The 1982, we saw The Thing. So it's the 40th anniversary of John Carpenter's classic sci-fi horror, The Thing. And then it is also the 10th anniversary of what I jokingly refer to as The Other Thing, the 2011 prequel to the John Carpenter Thing. And if anybody is looking at this going, wow, you're sucking up to Gary, aren't you? Sure, yeah, well, we'll go with that. That's fine. What I do want to remind everybody about is that this is the after panel. So what we did was, in the before panel, we asked you to watch these three movies and then join us for this panel. So if at this point you've not seen the before panel, pause this video, go watch the before panel. We invite you to watch these three movies and then come back and finish this.
Yeah, we'll be waiting right here.
Yeah, so
Right
ready? And okay, so now we're back. You're back. You've watched the movies. It's been some number. Gary wasn't ready there, but it's been some number of days since we last talked to you. But welcome back. And by the way, if you think I'm ever going to get tired of that joke, no. All right, so let's move along here. Let's talk about what I'm going to do is I seriously pondered for about an hour, spread out over the last few days, what order to talk about these movies in the after panel. I am going to, you might say I'm being wimpy, but I think you'll see that it makes sense. We're actually going to go in chronological order.
Okay.
I think that it is right.
Taking the easy way out.
Well, partly, but I think that what's happening here is I want to talk about why the 2011 film, and you need the John Carpenter 1982 film to do that, and you need the 1951 film to do that. So it isn't like, it would be interesting to have this discussion in the order in which the story happens in the films, not the order of the films. But no. If somebody wants to do their own panel and do that, knock yourself out. All right, so let's start.
So you'll be on that panel at DragonCon for my track, right?
Sure, absolutely. We got some talented people here available for that already, but we can share. All right, so stay on topic. So what we're going to do is I want to get some business out of the way first. Did everybody, show of fingers, how many of these three movies did you watch since we recorded the before panel? Okay, so Gary's inventing a couple of movies there, but yes, so everybody saw all three of these. Excellent. Fabulous. Thank you. I will let you guys know that isn't always the result when we get to the after panel. Of
They
course,
don't do their
I'm
homework.
the main culprit there, but that's history. That's convention history. Let's talk about the 1951 The Thing from Another World. I would like to let Jessa go first on this one if she's up for it.
Sure, let's talk about it.
Yes.
Where do you want to start? So this is our first introduction to the thing. It really lays the groundwork for what we're going to see in the continuing films. Is really a collaborative piece. It is meant to be an ensemble piece. Each character definitely gets their own personality, and for me, I always sort of enjoyed this one because of those interactions. So I don't remember which of you guys had already seen it. I think Aubrey, you hadn't,
No,
but
I
Darin
hadn't.
and Gary, you both had already.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. One of the things that we didn't talk about in the before panel that I really got to revisit, we'll say when we did the rewatch, was this is a co-ed cast, right? So Margaret Sheridan, I've always been a fan of, and it's really easy to think like, why would you have women in the Arctic? But I really appreciate her role in this film. Granted, it does add a little bit of that sort of cheeky romantic thing to the script, but it doesn't go too far. I mean, it is a 50s film, and you kind of expect that it's going to be there. But it really threads that needle really well in that it's lovely. It's just cheeky fun without going too far. But it also doesn't necessarily make her a damsel in distress either.
Yeah, she doesn't just stand there and scream the whole time.
Right. She kind of puts them in their place a little bit, which I really appreciate. That, even though, yes, she is a woman on the station, everybody sort of defers to her, right? So she keeps things moving. She's the facilitator. She makes sure that, all those notes are taken, but also that everything runs smoothly, that the guys are doing what they need to be doing without sort of getting in the way, which is really something in some films, particularly of that era, you kind of have to be wary of. It does happen a lot.
So let me ask the ladies on the panel a question here, because I'm not qualified to have a strong opinion about this. When there's a moment in the film where he interrupts her taking those notes, and he says, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "Well, you better hit me on the chin so you can see these notes." And he's like, "What?" And then he takes the notes and he reads them. Ladies, how did you feel about that line of dialogue? Was that cheeky, or was that kind of playing into the casual misogyny, quote unquote casual misogyny of the era?
That, to me, that wasn't the part that I like. That part was like almost like, chatty broy almost, compared to an earlier scene that happened between them, which was not max level creep factor, but it was definitely 50s level creep factor, where it's just like, and then you were an octopus because your hands were all over the place. I'm like, that is a 50s line. That is definitely what that is. And so, yeah, that was more cheeky compared to the octopus comment.
Yeah. I definitely agree. And I think for me, because it is the 50s, and we have to remember that, right, about this film, that those relations are something very different. And yeah, they are going to get into creepy territory, because we find out a little bit of backstory about how these characters met. The captain and Margaret Sheridan's character met, and they get a little backstory. There's a little, we'll call it a date, that, went the way that you might expect it would have gone. But I appreciate that it's a really odd thing to say, that they have the conversation, but also that I appreciate her stance, that she doesn't shy away from it, that later we're going to sort of see her take charge of their relationship. And he just sort of defers, and there's a little bit of like, oh, I don't remember, I was drunk kind of thing, which is problematic. Let's be clear here. It was problematic then. It is problematic now. but I think they do a really good job of having that conversation. And it's also the fact that everybody else knows about it, but it's not a situation that makes her the brunt of the joke.
Yeah.
It's not a situation
Oh,
where
yeah.
everybody's talking about, oh, this thing that this girl did. It then becomes about, hey, this guy had this opportunity that was wasted.
Yes, I thought the fact that 12 people ribbed him about their relationship throughout the film was very interesting. Everyone knew, and everyone had a snarky comment, which was kind of interesting. But I think you're right. I think that's something I missed, in that the subtle criticism, the poking, wasn't directed at her.
It was at
directed at him, which was
is
for the 50s. Well, I
It's
thought it was
problematic.
refreshing that they weren't thinking that it was her problem. It was a mistake that he made. Still not terribly
How dare
okay.
she lead him on, which would have been
worse, but
yeah, she wasn't a hussy, right?
right. But I mean, that's what would have happened to a lot of movies in the 50s back in the day. It'd have been, oh, why was she going out with this drunk guy? Obviously, she wanted his hands all over her.
Well, I thought
the 50s were full of problems.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to spend the whole time talking about just this. We got a couple other topics, but I do want to quickly mention that I really thought it was very charming that his hands were not tied.
Yeah.
And he was
that was funny.
Along, and then she took 3 minutes of dialogue to go, oh, how long have you been untied? I'm just like, it was just,
that was
I thought it was very cute.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason this film stands up as moments like that. It's very well scripted. It's very well acted. It's put together.
Mm-hmm.
Howard Hawks there's a reason his movies have withstood from that era. And, even, looking at it through the modern lens, it's still not as problematic as, like, say, the grasshoppers that ate Chicago. It's like there are tons of knockoff versions of this, because this was a trendsetter. This is one of the first.
Mm-hmm.
And almost everybody, you have to put the girl in there, and then all she does like I said earlier, all she does the whole movie is save me, the giant, and get threatened by the giant monster. She actually never gets threatened really at all.
No, there's actually a moment where she takes the time to say, oh, so you don't need me, great, so I'm gonna go ahead and go with them.
Yeah.
She's smart enough to get out of the way. You don't need to be here for this.
As far as the storytelling goes, I thought that it was really nice that that's how the military people got access to the scientific information, was that bridge of their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't swooning. She wasn't two-dimensional. She wasn't a piece of cardboard. She and the captain were in a real relationship that was,
messy.
Okay, messy is fine. I was going to say transformative or transforming, but whatever.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is that it's important that they have the relationship, because she goes, yeah, here's the papers.
Yeah.
Right. Which was kind of important. That transition of that information was kind of critical to the story.
Yeah, she didn't have any hemming and hawing over, well, the right thing to do would be to give him the notes so he knows what's going on. She's like, no, the scientist is out of his gourd here.
Yeah. Okay, well, good. All right. So what we will do is I want to now talk about the reason why they're all up there lighting things on fire accidentally, which is The Thing from Another World. This is, if I remember correctly, is based off of John Campbell's short story.
Who goes
there?
And my understanding, I think we talked about this in the before panel, is it's not entirely based on the story, not as much as John Carpenter's version.
Right, because they just simply couldn't do the effects.
Well, yeah, that's right. In 1951, that would have been really tough. Well, let's talk about what happened with this particular version of The Thing. And if you've been playing along, you'll remember that it grew an extra arm.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean a third arm, right? I'm talking about its arm got ripped off and it grew the arm back. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, what I was thinking about the whole time was just like, how do you feel about a killer carrot? Because they made a joke that it was like a killer carrot at some point. Yeah. And I was like, and I watched it with my dad, who has read the story and seen all of the movies except the most recent one. And he was just like, that's not how it was a thing. I'm like, it's cool. It's cool to have a plant-based alien life form, because its biology is completely different than ours. And it's just like it defrosted and it's alive again. And I'm like, yeah, no, that was cool. It wasn't the thing as we know it, as the original story outlined it, as my dad was saying, but it was cool. And it was very I don't know, it was just very interesting, but also it was a thing that's like, he looked at it under a microscope and he's like, this is how they do all the things, and this is how they reproduce, and they must advance. And I'm like, that was a little exposition-y. I think we've improved that over the years, but it was fun.
But yet it was a little exposition-y, but I think they did a really good job of making it make plausible sense.
Yeah.
Like if he was a sentient vegetable that could live off of human blood, that's the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
That's all the motivation everybody needs is I'm hungry and you're food, but you don't want me to eat you. There you go.
Yeah.
That's all the conflict you need.
Yeah. Well, there's that conflict and the conflict again, which I talked about in the before panel, of the conflict of the scientists versus the military, versus the thinkers versus the men of action, which would go on to be a template for the 50s and America in general of, it must be, it's more advanced than us scientifically, so it must be more advanced than civilized, so obviously we can reason with it. And the military is like, are you out of your gourd? We have to shoot it in the face. It obviously has come here to take over the world. You don't know what you're talking about. And and that, like I said, that became the template for pretty much every single one of the atomic horror films of the 50s. Was you have the scientist who goes too far and does just, and obvious, and as we all know, it's a stand-in for communism.
Yeah. No, the communism part is on this. This is, I think, the second or third time I've seen this movie, and they're in Alaska, and then they're in Arctica, not Antarctica, like the other two. So the fact that they moved it to the Arctic is so they could be near Russia, because you can smell Russia from Alaska. So what I'm wondering is, because at the end of the movie he actually says, "Keep watching the skies." It was part of the epilogue from the reporter, and I'm sitting there going, wait. Now I don't know the answer. Was this the first movie that did that, and then that's the trope namer?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Gary's saying yes. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It all comes, like I said, it all comes from here. A lot of that era of horror saw this and went, "Oh, we're going to do that," and they don't do it as well.
Which is not.
Which is what happens all the time in Hollywood.
Well, it's not this movie's fault that we have all those really bad versions of this movie, because this movie was really good. It's a good story. It's good. Yeah, it's just good.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I just really quickly before I pick on Jessa again, I just want to mention again. We'll go over this again, but the dogs knew what was up.
Oh yeah,
That's why I'm a dog person, because dogs will know when it's an alien.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things watching it again this time I picked up on. I don't know if I should talk about it now or when we get to the Carpenter one, but there are so many bits that happen in this that I'm like, oh, that's where the Carpenter one got this, like the attack with the dogs, the examination of the arm of, actually it's not dead, which in the Carpenter one where they're examining the burnt up things and it's not really dead. I mean, there's a lot of the guy being on fire running out into the snow, but they did that gag deliberately because that's an iconic scene. So I was like, I picked up a lot more on the okay, there's the touchstone, there's the touchstone, there's the touchstone.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, there are two things.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Jessa, please.
So with this film, there are two things that definitely set it apart from the others. And the first is this is definitely more of the military film, where we have to deal with those chain of command issues. But I also really like some of the relationships there as well. Between Bobby and Captain, where I've got a great idea and I'm just trying to help you out, and they have that really cute. I'm going to offer up, here's an idea you might be thinking of, so that you can sort of go along with it. But they appreciate that, yes, Bobby's got great ideas. He doesn't mind that I borrow them. But also that having to, yes, I want to make a decision, but I don't have the final say here. We really need to get in touch, and we need to get that from command. In the meantime, we're going to do it because that's standard operating procedure. And that's sort of, we don't get that as much with the later films, but also the introduction of Scotty, our reporter, which we don't see in the other two.
Right.
So that idea that in addition to, sure, scientific discovery and the military maybe wanting to get this technology, there's also this pressing forward from the media, and that we got to be the first one to get the story. Somebody's going to get the story. People are already talking about sort of aliens. in whatever form that is, but that Ned's got to be right there at the start of it, in the front lines, to be the first one to get it, to get the story and really push that narrative forward even more.
Yeah. The chain of command stuff is very interesting. I don't think Kurt Vonnegut could have written a better scenario where the military communications were all just a mess.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was a mess was part of it. We're going to run out of time here, but I do want to throw something on the table real quick, or I'm going to explode. The first one is, this is really an excellent example of storytelling with no special effects and with the magic of just dialogue and impressionism, if you'll forgive the term. Here's the best example from this movie. The term flying saucer was accidentally coined in 1947 by a pilot who described a UFO and said that that's the way it flew. He wasn't saying it was saucer shaped. He was saying it flew like you just threw a dish across the room and it went wobble, wobble, wobble. And that we picked up on flying saucer. This is only 4 years after that, right? So excellent, inexpensive storytelling where they were standing on the ice and they said, all right, everybody get to a point of it. Let's see how big it is. And everyone watching knew what that meant, that they were just standing there.
That was excellent.
It was
that whole scene
done.
was excellent.
Yes. And it cost them what, $8.50 for that? You know, it's like, awesome. Because we
and I love the fact that and I love the fact they played up with the whole, how do we have the budget for a ship? We don't. Okay, we'll just blow it up by accident.
Yeah.
It's an unknown metal. We didn't know it was going to react with thermite like that.
Yes. And I would like to know how many puppeteers were under the table making the vegetables breathe. and breathe.
That was a cool, creepy effect.
That
I also
was.
have to mention, and I also have to mention that it took about 2 minutes for me to go, that's Paul Frees. I know that voice. That's Paul Frees. The guy who would go on to do a voice for like the Haunted Mansion. And
I accidentally I just randomly picked a movie and put it in the player yesterday, and James Arness was the 7-foot tall soldier in the World War II movie. Yep. And the fact that he was 7 feet tall was a recurring gag. I was like, I know that guy, James Arness.
That's the reason I hired him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and like we were saying, also the fact that the monster's only in like 4 scenes.
Yeah. Yep. And they just, it's just very well done. It's very well done. We could probably do another 45 minutes just on this movie, but for some stupid reason, we got 2 other movies to talk about. So let's do this. Let's make the transition to John Carpenter's classic, unappreciated early, but very appreciated now, 1982, The Thing. The only thing in my mind at this, well, we'll get to that later. So here's what's going to happen is we're going to talk about this movie for 15 minutes. And Gary, if I have to mute you at the 15-minute mark, I will. But the 3 of us are going to back up a little bit and let you run with it, because Gary and I have talked about this movie offline about 7 times. And every time he and I talk about it, I like it more. Right? I watched it again recently, and this is the most notes I've ever taken on any movie review for a panel. I got 2 pages of notes. We're not going to get to a tithe.
How many of those notes were about Kurt Russell's fabulous hair and beard?
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Let's let the ladies go first on this one.
Yeah. Go for it.
I
saw him. Oh no. I saw him and I was just like, I looked over at my dad. I was like, he looks like Final Girl material. And I was for him the entire time.
He really just want to know what his routine is.
What his
I might have just seen a meme.
There are no women in this one, but I was like, he is my final girl, and I knew that as soon as I saw him with those stunning blue eyes and that floppy, gorgeous hair.
The hair is amazing. It really is. His hair and his beard are his best supporting actors.
But
and NECA has put out 2 different versions of him in this movie as figures. And I had to buy them both because one comes with the sombrero, one comes with the flamethrower, one comes with it's like, you bastards, you knew you'd get me.
Yeah. And that brings me to my counter to the beard and hair, which is the hat.
Yes.
Wardrobe, I think it was in one of the documentaries. Wardrobe gave him the hat. Everybody went, what the heck? And they loved it and they ran with it, and it's great. It's an iconic hat. It's an iconic hat.
Yeah.
So John Carpenter talks about, let's get this part over with. John Carpenter talks about how he was a huge fan of the 1951 movie, obviously. And he talked about how he decided intentionally not to have any women in this movie, in this version, and it was to take that tension out of the movie. And I think what he was implying was because there was already enough other kinds of tension.
Mm-hmm.
How did the three of you feel about that?
I'll let the ladies speak on that because I think it's a boneheaded idea.
A boneheaded. Okay, Gary was succinct for once. Jessa?
I actually agree with John Carpenter. Because also, again, it is a film of its time. And I think given how women were treated in other similar films of the time, I think it's smart because there was no way, there are very rare instances at that time when women are introduced to those stories and don't become the damsel, don't become just cannon fodder, don't become just the sexual whatever, where they just integrate into the story and are there for the story's sake. So I think it was a smart idea. He either didn't want to or couldn't figure a way to remove all of those elements and still have it be a great streamlined vision of what he wanted. So it's better just not to touch it.
Mm-hmm. I totally
Aubrey?
agree with that. Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. It's just that ideally I would have liked to see a character be a woman and it not be a big deal, but I don't think that would have happened in the 80s. And I think the movie is better for it not have be a big deal because there's not anyone there, which sucks, like I said. But nowadays, obviously, I hold it to a higher standard, but I think it was the right choice for not only movie making, but for social issues at the time because it was the 80s.
So,
yeah,
we covered this. Well, Gary, real quick. We covered this in the before panel, but this is a hard rated movie. It is time for me to say trigger warnings, various trigger warnings coming, because one thing I want to say now that the two of you have spoken up about this, about being positive about there being no women in the cast, is I think I would have turned the movie off the moment there was a sexual encounter where the Thing was one of the two partners. That would have been
that would have
worse.
been
So much worse.
Been bad.
Would have been it would not have increased the horror or the tension. It would have made me go, nope, I'm out. Don't care.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, that would have been bad. My
It's
only
just
counter
a
to this
stunt.
is John Carpenter made Escape from New York with Adrienne Barbeau. He'd made The Fog, also with her and Jamie Lee Curtis, and he made Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. The man knew how to write strong female characters without sexualizing them.
Okay.
Although Adrienne Barbeau in Escape from New York is very low cut, but she's not there just to scream. She's just as dangerous as Harry Dean Stanton's character. So that's why I don't think it was a good idea, but in the end it pays off and the movie's perfect, so I'm not going to argue it that strongly. And
Yeah,
then
I totally condemn him for like having the lack of imagination or intuition or whatever it is to not be able to do it. But I mean, I can also applaud, like, you knew that was your limitation with this project. At least you can own that.
Well,
you got to know your limitations.
Yeah, we will definitely come back to this particular point when we talk about the third movie.
Oh yeah,
because they handled it differently. We'll get back to
Completely.
this, but I also want to throw another one of those 3x5 cards up on the table and say, and of course I am being a little sarcastic, but this is what happened. This is a haunted house trapped on an island horror movie, right? It's a 10 Little Indians kind of situation. And there is a long-running joke about the first person to die in a horror movie. The first two people to die in this horror movie were Norwegians.
Yep.
And
they had
no
it coming.
offense, Norwegians, but it doesn't get much whiter than that. So that cliche was handled immediately and subverted wonderfully.
Subverted immediately.
Yeah.
Subverted immediately, which is great. The unfortunately, again, trigger warning, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh people to die weren't humans. They were dogs, which
that is the hardest scene to watch in the movie, especially.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I have to say that this is one of those movies that makes you watch the whole credits so you can see what the Humane Society statement is. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but the Humane Society has different versions of "we were there watching," and it isn't always "nothing was harmed." That isn't always what it says. They tried, but sometimes things happen to humans and non-humans alike. The scenes with the dogs are the most disturbing and upsetting for me, for my wife, right? Those are the ones where we're like, they're messing with the dogs.
Well, because arguably they're also the most graphic. I think when you're talking about like the actual subject being attacked and seeing that happen, it's really
they
it's
are
a little rough.
No, you're right. They don't pull any punches. They don't pull the punches as much with the dogs, but also there is a moment where, and at some point later, we don't have time right now, but Gary and I can go over this later offline, which is they're injecting the dogs. And I'm like, oh, so they're euthanizing the dogs, but then the dogs are around later.
No, they were just putting morphine in the dogs. They were calming them down.
Morphine. Okay. Yeah. So I'm sitting there going, so now they're euthanizing the dogs, and then later Blair kills the dogs. So obviously he didn't euthanize them the second time, but he definitely murderized them the third time. I was like, oh, the poor dogs. Yeah. It was very well done, but it was also very graphic and specific.
So what did the Humane Society marker say, or did you not have those notes?
Did I not? I didn't specifically look at the Humane Society note on this particular movie because I'm pretty sure they knew what to do and they handled it well. There's a great little moment in one of the documentaries where they just go real dog, fake dog, real dog, fake dog. I'm just like, okay, all right. I'm fine. I'm good now.
Something specific I noticed about the dogs is that because we watched the first two back to back because we just had the time and it was like, we're on a roll. So if you're watching the first movie, which is of course 1952, there's an explosion and the dogs are all sitting there like, huh, that's nice. This is ice. This is cool. In the movie that's in the 80s, the dog training and acting is incredible for that opening scene and for afterwards with the tension building of how a dog can sit there and look sinister because it's not a dog. And I'm like, it's greatly improved. And I would assume that along with that, animal welfare on set has improved.
Yeah. Well, in one of the documentaries, they're talking with the guy, Clark, the actor, and he's talking about the dog handler was on set the whole time, especially for that one, because it was half dog, half wolf. And he was talking about sometimes the dog would just look at you. And the guy's like, if he gives you this look, don't move, just chill out. He's seen something and he might go at you if you react. But that dog was one hell of an actor because every scene where it's walking through and it would like stop and look at things. And you were just like, that dog is not a dog. It's thinking, it's processing.
It's planning.
Yep. There's also another moment. We're going to spend the whole time talking about the fabulous dog actors. There's this one moment where there's a single cut where the dog does like 5 or 6 different versions of acting cues all the way down the hall in one cut. And I didn't realize because I'm just like, yeah, it's dog, right? No, the dog is acting. It's amazing how
the scene where he walks down the hallway, looks to turn into the doorway, stops because he thinks he hears something, and then moves over to the other doorway across the hall and walks in.
And one of my favorite production notes is that moment when the dog walks into the room and there you see that silhouette of the guy and he turns and it fades to black and we figure that's probably the first victim. That's not any one of the actors. That's one of the production guys. Carpenter deliberately did that because he didn't want people to figure out who it was in the silhouette.
Yep.
Oh,
and this is 82, and Carpenter knew we would do that. Yeah. This is how much forethought and process and work he puts into telling this really amazing story. Because like the obvious joke, and it never occurred to me, is if you could speak Norwegian, they ruin the film in the first 3 minutes.
That's not a dog. Yeah, he's screaming like it's not a dog, it's an alien. Get away from it. You don't understand.
Yeah, it's imitating a dog in Norwegian. If you can speak Norwegian, if you've got the wrong subtitles on, ruins the whole everything, right? Ruins the first half hour of the movie at least. So yeah, it is amazing that he went to that level of detail about not letting the hairdo of the shadow give away which character it was. It's just amazing.
Yeah. And you still can't really definitively say, well, who got gotten first? What order did they get gotten? Exactly.
Naturally.
You know, was Blair infected before they locked him up in the tool shed, or did it get him afterwards? There's so much ambiguity in this movie, which is why we can keep talking about it. Like I was saying in the before panel, there's so many movies where they would have over-explained anything, which is one of the problems with the last one. is, oh, well, obviously we figured all this stuff out. And it's like, no, it's scarier and makes much more sense. Like one of my favorite lines in the whole movie is when they're discussing about it and he's going, do you believe any of this voodoo? And they're like, well, why does it do that? And McCready's like, because it's different from us. I don't know. What do you want from me? I'm a helicopter pilot.
Yeah. Yep. So Jessa, Aubrey, what are your, I don't like to ask favorite questions, but what stands out in your mind as a moment in this movie that's worth mentioning to our audience?
I always, sorry, go ahead,
Go
Aubrey.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
All right, I choose Aubrey this time, just randomly.
Oh, okay. The special effects, there's a certain scene where I don't know how much I can say, but a head becomes autonomous and grows legs and walks off. And that scene, while disgusting, is it thinking about it, the fact that it's in the 80s and there's no CGI involved at all, except for the opening title, which is weird and not that great. But the rest of the movie,
not CGI, by the way.
Oh, that's true. Okay, that's interesting. But that with the head that sprouted legs and walked away, they did the best job of making the thing seem dangerous and adaptable, because that was one of my questions in 2011. It's just like, they are both assuming that we have seen the movie and assuming that we have not seen the movie that came before it, because there's just certain things with that. But with this one, they can show you how dangerous this thing is without having to tell you that it's dangerous, because we saw how adaptable it is and how you have to kill every single piece of it. It was just, that was awesome.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I want to quick comment on that, and I'm going to put Jess on the spot, which is that one of the things that I thought was so amazing about the design of this movie was they understood that if every single cell of your body is its own sentient creature, you don't care which end is up. Things grew out of wherever it wanted them to grow out of. Sometimes that was really gross, and sometimes it was really creative and cool, or both. So, all right, Jessa, what about you? What was your answer to my question?
I don't know that it's if it has to be like a scene, I suppose it's the autopsy where poor Blair gets it's not a great thing for him. But non-effects wise, I'm always drawn to Gary. Sorry, Gary, not my Gary, but Captain Gary.
Leader. Yes.
Captain Gary, because he is the one that everybody wants to suspect from the get-go. You kind of wonder, why is he even there? The guys all treat him like, he's just aged out, like this is the last post, like nobody really takes him seriously, but he's the guy that's got the stripes, right? But from the first time you meet him, I mean, that is a dead shot. Like, from the first time we meet him, and then everybody just brushes him off. And then, he spends his entire movie just sort of kind of in the background until we get to the point where we really got to figure out like who's infected, who's not. And just the couch scene with the three of them tied up is just hilarious. Hopefully everyone's seen it by now, but if not,
if not, go back and watch the before panel. I have to say, Sheriff Gary has probably the best line of dialogue in the movie as far as I'm concerned. And I can't give you the whole thing, but it begins with, "I know you gentlemen have been through a lot."
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it escalates quickly. That line of dialogue to me is, if you just look at that one line of dialogue and that 1 minute of acting, that's why this movie is so amazing.
Yeah.
Because these 12 men have made this personal and real and visceral for all of us. It's amazing to watch.
And the whole movie does a really great job of pointing you in the wrong direction. Because, I mean, the entire thing is, you would assume that this creature wants to get away, wants to spread, wants to find other people, get off the base. But we spend so much of this movie destroying things that you would think it would count people out. But then you realize, no, you can't really count those people out anyways. It's just a matter of who is infected when, and can you follow the trail?
Yeah. So the whole reason this movie works is because of the character. Every single person, there's not a filler character in here. everybody has a major role. They were talking about this in one of the other documentaries, that they had a year to plan before they even started making the movie. And all the actors got together and they decided, okay, well, I'm here for this reason. I don't like you, but you like him. And they figured out the interpersonal relationships that you would have of people who were stuck in the Antarctic together, maybe against their will, for 6 to 8 months. They're going to have these relationships. You have Palmer and Childs sharing the joint when they're watching TV. You have, like Jessa was saying, everybody blowing off Gary. You have Blair obviously having a relationship with Bennings, and there's so much interpersonal that you all buy it. And Carpenter layers that in also with staging, like talking about the scene when Windows runs off and gets the shotgun, when he realizes that things are like going out of control and he's trying to get the shotgun out. And you were talking about Gary comes in there and he's got the gun on him. If you watch the staging, Gary's like here, all the rest of them are over here, but McReady is off and behind, separate from everybody, until things start to calm down, and then he steps up and figuratively and literally takes command of the group away from Gary. At that point, he gets the gun, he gets the knife from Palmer or Clark. He gets the knife from Clark. And he just steps up and now he's in charge.
Yeah.
From that moment on. All that character dynamics played out with a single bit of dialogue. It's all just in the acting and staging.
It is very beautifully done.
Yeah. One of my favorite pieces of staging is the very first time we meet McReady. What is he doing? He's playing chess against the computer.
And losing.
And he loses. And he pours the vodka or his scotch into the computer and says, cheating bitch. That tells you everything we need to know about him as a character.
Yeah.
He's willing to destroy the game instead of lose. And that's how the movie ends.
And that's what he does. Yeah.
Hold on. Speaking of losing, because we're about to run out of time on this one, unfortunately. This is the part where I look at the audience and I go, guys, please comment on this video and beg Gary to come back and do more about John Carpenter's The Thing, because if I can get him to come back and do an hour of just explaining this movie to me, I will see if I can get it recorded and share it with you guys. So before we run out of time on this one, because unfortunately we got another movie, I'm going to start with Jessa, but I want you to, we're going to let Gary go last on this. Jessa, how does this movie end? What's your opinion? And you're right, because it's your opinion. What's your opinion on what happened at the end?
A big old question mark. The best way it could possibly end.
Okay.
It's open-ended. And that's how I love it.
Okay.
This movie does a great job of giving you lots of questions. It definitely adds to the universe. But there are a lot of questions that go unanswered. I've always wondered why such a big ship and only one creature. And especially after watching this movie, you are like, really? All this space and one creature? Okay, sure. But there's always going to be that question, right? When there's any lone survivor or set of survivors, did you succeed, right? And this movie certainly sets that up even more so. But also sort of leaves you, I would argue, with more of a morality question as to whether or not our final character did the right thing. Because you don't get the same payoff that you get with the other deaths.
Okay.
So maybe it's just me, but I am all about this movie was just questions for me. Just more and more questions. Yeah. With a great cast, though, which who knew that it had this cast?
Great cast. Aubrey, how about you? What happened at the end?
I think the thing survived. I was like, oh, ambiguous ending and stuff, but I was skeptical. And then I was talking to my dad about it, and he was like, did you notice, I don't know if this is a spoiler. Well, it's a spoiler, but did you notice that one of them was breathing and the other wasn't? And I'm like, no, I didn't. And we ran it back, and one of them is breathing and the other wasn't. And I personally believed that before, because I was looking and I was like, so there's a new Thing movie about every 30 years. I want to see the next one And that's where you could put it in if you wanted to do it. If anyone's listening who can do that, that's where you would put it in and make a better movie than the most recent one. But so
We're about to get to that.
Yeah, I think it survived.
Before Gary, I'm gonna let you go next, but real quick, my answer to the question is I saw John Carpenter's Escape from New York, where Snake Plissken doomed the world to nuclear annihilation because he destroyed the tape. Yeah, I'm with whoever said the thing survived. Yeah, I'm with that. Okay, Gary,
Is it in hibernation or is it on the road?
Hibernation? Yeah, it survived.
Hibernation till later.
Can you do it in less than 2 minutes, Gary?
Yes. Everybody loves that. Maybe the Childs is a thing and the thing survived, and use the breathing as a thing. But we just watched it in the 4K, and Carpenter, as the DP has come out on this, it's lighting that causes that. If you look, because with Russell, he's sitting there full on in light from the flames. With Childs, he's sitting down with his back to the flames. If you look, you can actually see faintly the steam coming out of his mouth. It's just not as lit as it is with MacReady. Now, I'm down with ambiguity that we don't know, and because honestly, the way the movie ends, we don't know. I personally like to think that Childs is still human. Now, there may still be a thing that got away, because every piece of this got away. So you could easily do the sequel follow-up that there was another piece of it. I always thought blowing one of them up was dynamite was probably a bad idea. If every single piece of this is you just scattered 100 of them.
Yeah.
It's raining Palmer.
Ooh. All right, I'm reclaiming my time after that one.
Yeah, but personally, I'm very much with Jessa. I love the fact that we don't know. That's one of the reasons the movie is, again, why we're still talking about it, is that we can have that discussion. And like Darin pointed out, it's part of that Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy. There's this, In the Mouth of Madness,
right,
and Prince of Darkness, where the world basically ends.
Excellent. Okay, and I do want to add one quick thing, since we're talking about the Is Childs a Thing. I was explaining
that's the tack the comic book sequel went with.
I was ranting and I was on a rant about this movie right after I'd watched it, after I had 2 pages of notes, and I said to my wife, I said, there's this weird moment where MacReady says, of course you guys have seen it, if we have any surprises for each other, maybe we should go ahead and get that out of the way, and he hands him the scotch or whatever it is, the bottle he's been drinking out of, and Childs doesn't pause, flinch, nothing. He takes the bottle and he takes a drink, and I went, if you're the Thing, you don't care what's in the bottle.
Well, but I think they're both resigned to die also. So one way or another.
That is,
watch.
Both of them know they're dead.
Yeah. The next time you watch it, watch Kurt Russell's face when he grabs it and he's by himself. There's this look of joy of, oh God, the Scotch survived. Thank God.
Yes, of course. Yes.
He's loved.
All right. And speaking of needing a drink of scotch,
do we really have to?
get? I've shortened the time on this movie. Again, probably should have done this movie first.
We spent $4 on it. So
the 2011 prequel, The Other Thing, should we just all agree that it stank on ice, pun intended, then we'll go back to talking about the Carpenter film?
I will give it credit for one idea.
I think I know which one it is.
How they figured out who was a Thing.
The teeth filling.
The teeth fillings. I thought that was incredibly clever. I was like, okay.
That was
that works. And then they go and ruin it at the end when she goes, you know how I knew you were human? Your earring. And he grabs the wrong ear. And I'm like, he's a perfect imitation. He wouldn't grab the wrong ear. Sorry if you have to edit that out.
But also, if you've ever worn earrings, they fall out.
No, but the frustration is there, because one of the things that's been not very well explained on purpose in any of these movies is, 2 of these movies, is what kind of imitation? Does it look like us, or does it absorb? Does it make copies of our nerve cells, and therefore technically it has all of our memories, so it knows?
Well, it has to, because it was Bennings. It was Palmer for a while. It was Norris for a while.
Except it was such a perfect imitation.
It imitates his heart conditions.
Well, okay, but hold on. That brings up a good point, which is when in either of these two movies, because we're supposed to be talking about the 2011 movie, I went back and I was thinking about the dialogue, and I'm trying to find a moment where the thing said something that only that person would know. And I don't know if it happens. It probably does happen. I'd love to get feedback on that from the comments, but I'm sitting here going, okay, did Carpenter's script give away that the thing knew stuff about the person it was imitating or not? I didn't catch it.
If I was an imitation, a perfect imitation.
Right. Right. So why would it grab the wrong earlobe?
Yeah.
That was one of the things that upset me about especially after watching the second one, is that I was like, okay, but they didn't establish that for us. I feel like, and I can't recall a specific dialogue or anything like that. I feel like they established that when it replicates a person, it replicates them fully, including the whatever hard physical matter is memory. And I feel like it established that. I feel like it did that because we saw it. Now, in the 2011 one, they do not establish that. In fact, they don't fully establish whether or not you are replaced or infected and taken over. It's not completely clear either way. And I don't need it spelled out to me, but I need to know enough to know whether or not this is the same body with a different mind possessing it, a different infected mind possessing it, or whether or not I'm going to find the actual body somewhere else. I feel like I didn't have that question in the 82 one, but I had that question the entire time during the 2011 one.
Yep.
Jessa?
There's a lot left to just assume, right? 'Cause from the 2011, like, yeah, we see he's been absorbed, but then we also have the bloody shower, right?
Mhm.
Leaving behind the inorganic material. And then you have like the interpersonal relationships that don't really change other than the paranoia that's created. So you don't really ever establish, like, nobody ever says, well, they're not really acting the same. The only real doubt that's cast there is, when we lose the Americans and they come back.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, but did you guys really know them to begin with? Arguably, yes, you're going to question them because they've been gone so long. How did you survive a crash up in the mountains? How did you make it that far so fast? And you're injured. There's a lot of questions here. But yeah, they just sort of leave it to be assumed. But right, how do you then have that absorption? But also, right, we've talked to, Aubrey, you brought up like the infection level. Like, we're looking at the slide watching the infection happen. So which is it?
Yeah, that's what I felt like. Which is it? Just make it tell me which one it is.
Yeah. I thought that it was very interesting that the 2011 movie had the CGI and the production money, and I'm not going where you think I'm going, to show us what the doctor saw in the microscope. Because Blair's 1982 computer Atari 2600 version was like, wait, how does the computer do that in 1982? It doesn't. They just use some graphics to try and help us understand what Blair was seeing.
Right.
Did it work? You know what? You know what's really interesting about the two movies in comparison is the science didn't make any sense in the first one, but I didn't care.
Yeah.
But I really needed them to clarify the science in the second one, and that's not good.
Yeah.
That's not a good sign. So I think that's kind of what Aubrey was saying earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gary.
And so much of the plot in the first one. I mean, there are some things I could live with from the thing. Like, okay, it's doing things that don't make sense because it's just woken up. It hasn't taken over any humans yet. It has no idea what's going on. Okay, so fine. It goes on the offensive. It attacks. It kills people. For the first few, that's fine. But then once it starts absorbing people and learning us and learning our culture, it still just attacks for no reason. The one that drove me up the wall watching it the first time and still made me almost want to quit watching it then and now is when the helicopter is flying away, it's getting what it wants, it's leaving, and the guy just, I think I'm going to eat the other guy across from me now. Why? I don't know.
Yeah.
No reason whatsoever. It just, because so much of this movie happens because it had to. When he drives the axe into the wall, cutting the one hand in half.
And she's like, no, stop. I'm like,
yeah. I'm like, why? I really expected him to say why, and her go, because they have to find this in the next movie. It has to be here.
Right.
That's the whole reason that happens. There are so many things that happen just because that's how it had to happen. And I don't put any of this, by the way, on the production crew. I shared with the three of you some behind the scenes videos of the people making the effects and the prosthetics.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of disturbs me that the prosthetics made in 2011, and I'm not talking about the bad CGI, I'm talking the prosthetics, the guy with the stretched faces, looked worse than what Rob Bottin did in 1982.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it looked not great. But again, no knock on them because they are obviously fans. One of them has a tattoo of the Norris thing on his arm when they're doing it. This was a passion project for the effects crew.
Yeah.
They were just let down by the writers and the director and the studio.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, Gary. Can you make a movie, not just a prequel or a sequel, but can you make a alien science fiction horror movie without dealing with John Carpenter's The Thing? I don't think so. I don't think you can ignore this movie. It is iconic, but it's also the crossroads. It's like if you want to do epic fantasy, you have to address the fact that Tolkien exists, right? It's that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
John Carpenter's The Thing exists, and you can't ignore it.
You can't ignore this, and you can't ignore Alien.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I would put those in that same box together. So one of the things that disappointed me about this movie was that they were obviously fans of Carpenter's version, but like not that this is a reasonable request because it's really an amazing story, but like the important elements of why we give a crap about these people didn't translate.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't remember liking many or any of these people, which is kind of sad because I'm very fond of all 12 of those idiots from the 1982 movie.
Mm-hmm.
The scene where they're figuring out in the most recent one, when they're figuring out with the fillings in the teeth because it can't replicate those, that made me care. That was the scene that had the most tension and the most suspense, which was what the Carpenter version was the best about, was the tension and the suspense. But that was when I cared about the characters, and it waned and waned and waned after that. Like not even our main character, who is the only woman there, and it just tapered off. So it's died a slow, sad death after that. My caring for what was going on with the characters, because that scene felt dangerous and tense and like there was something at stake.
Mm-hmm.
The whole movie is just variations on the us versus them, right? From the get-go. It's the Doctor
The
and Adam and
Americans.
Kate, and they're the other. And then you've got the Americans, they're the other. And the only real sort of like camaraderie and like actual relationships you have are among the Norwegians, whom we don't know because we didn't spend any time with them. So now we're trying to relationship build, but also we've got all of these other groups and nobody becomes the collaborative unit. So there's really no stakes in anything. I mean, really the only thing we have is Parker and Kate, right? So somehow we have a bond there. But sure, okay. But that's really it. Nobody else really cares about. I mean, Kate, you would assume from the way we meet her, has some sort of past relationship with Adam, but they throw that out the window real quick. Like nobody cares.
When he rolls her under the bus I don't know what I saw.
Yeah.
But also when he got absorbed, under the ping pong table by the other one, by the Thing, she didn't seem to be emotionally involved in the fact that her coworker and friend and
she had more concern over poor Tormund getting his face absorbed.
That was shocking.
And that's the only reason I cared about that character by the day. I was like, oh, that's Tormund.
And then the other thing is, obviously the two doctors know more than they're willing to tell anybody. But we start the movie with the whole setup of like, well, I know things, but I can't tell you. Well, I can tell you when we get there, but don't worry about that. So we're never going to find out anything. Okay, great. Thanks.
And this is, I'm glad you mentioned it's Sander, right? Dr. Sander, I think is what it was.
Something like that.
Sander is a throwback to Dr. Carrington from the 1951 movie.
They should have just named him Carrington. That's what they
should
have.
That would have been right. But Sander started off with that kind of would you like to have tea and crumpets with the Queen sort of attitude like Carrington, but then it took him 30 seconds to deteriorate into I am in charge, I'm the boss,
Right.
My junk is bigger than your junk. And I was like, okay, then you lost me. I was with Carrington the whole movie, even though I disagreed with him many times. I was with him. But Sander, I was like, don't care. I hope he dies.
Yeah.
Well, and with Carrington, there's a little bit of, you do still get the sense of there is something to be said for scientific preservation. And like, we don't know enough. We need to know more. We need to really investigate this, but also, maybe killing a life form that we should know things about. Whereas Sander, forget it. He's there for the glory. He's there to win himself a Nobel and be done with it. Kill them all if you have to, as long as I get the research I need.
Yeah, yeah. It's somewhere in the back of my head. Sander's got those little insect pins that they used to pin dead butterflies to boards, but his is 14 feet long.
Yeah.
He's like, here's your snack. Just stay so I can research you.
Yeah, but it fails on a story level because characters make actions that make no sense. Not just the alien, not just the thing, but the characters. Like the one, like I said, the one him rolling her under the bus for no reason. Them waiting, like, hey, we see this thing's not dead. Maybe we should tell somebody. 6 hours later, oh, by the way, I mean, there's so many. I was like, I just found a shower full of blood. Maybe I should kill somebody. No, I'll bring this up in a few minutes when it's more dramatic.
Put it in my pocket and hold it for later.
Right.
That and there was bring up questions about your character.
Yeah, and it fails as a prequel because as much effort as they put in some places, like that axe, or we have to set this stuff up so when people find it later, we go, oh, that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
They don't do any of the whole, they were spending a lot of time out on this ridge. Did they? Then there's, we saw the video of them standing in the circle around the ship and then thermiting it out. That does not happen in this movie.
That does not happen. It made me mad.
Yeah. It fails as a prequel. It fails as a story. It fails as a horror. It failed. Like I said, the only people I'm going to give any props to at all are the practical effects people.
Well, now we're starting to run out of time here, but I want to end with a couple of points that we've kind of touched on in the previous two movies that we talked about, which is, ladies, how did you feel about Kate as a leading female character? Oh boy, your silence is overwhelming.
She's all right.
I mean, she's
fine.
Right?
She's there.
She was smart.
She gets to do things.
And she was tough.
Right.
And she was a cold fish, unfortunately.
She didn't. There were some times where she made good decisions and sometimes where she made bad decisions. And that didn't, I don't think it had anything to do with her as a character. I think it was literally the hand of the writer pushing it so that she would do it. She was almost like she was not made strong enough to me to think, oh yes, those are her decisions. And that's totally what she would do because it didn't feel like that.
Yeah. There are no characters in this movie. There are plot points.
That's what it felt like. Now let's take the two of us at the end and go off alone somewhere to go into the spaceship that is not blown up, which I was like, this has definitely gone downhill at this point when the spaceship was not blown up and was actually there. And let's do all these things at the spaceship where it's just us two alone at the spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
I love that she pairs off with the Norwegian who speaks no English to go
I do
to
like
save
that.
vehicles. And I'm like, what? So we're going off alone together. I couldn't understand a single thing you were going to tell me anyway.
Yeah.
But sure, yeah. Okay. And I'm going to trust that you also know how to disable these vehicles because I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I think the only two I gave a damn about were Tormund because it's Tormund and Lars because he actually made sense as a character. He was like, burn them. I don't care. Burn them. They might be aliens. And then to find out at the end, oh, he's the guy who gets shot through the eyeball. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we knew how it was going to end. I thought it was funny that in my notes, and I didn't delete this even though I figured it out later, in my notes, I say Kate and Casper alive with 20 minutes left. How did they get back to the beginning of the 1982 film? And then the film ended. And I went, well, there you go. And then after the credits started, they went, get out the crowbar. We have to get back to where he's chasing the dog.
Mm-hmm.
There's that one scene where they open up the box and they go, look, grenades. And I'm like,
again, they spent so much time focusing on, hey, by the way.
She took like 6 of them and used one.
Yeah.
So how do we get a full box of grenades in the helicopter?
Yep. And now, and the one last topic I want to hit before we start wrapping this up is wow, they really crowbarred a black gentleman into the 2011 version.
That poor bastard.
I'm like, because I was just sitting there going,
That's
oh,
not just
token
you.
cliche alert.
He walks
'Cause they
off
had to
on
be
his
American.
own
Yeah.
to
And then
go
he-
look at the monster, and it's just like, oh no, oh no, oh no.
Yeah, I mean, right now that was interesting that they set us up for him to be the first person to die, and then he lasted a lot
wasn't,
longer than
yeah.
that. So that was okay. But just his mere presence on stage made me go, no, guys, no.
But also the only one not to
be
be assimilated. So yay!
Yeah, he's just straight up murdered.
Still-
Yeah, he's just
still
killed.
Yeah, shot in
Better,
the head.
worse.
Right. Basically, he was. So there's this moment in the '82 film where Clark brings a knife to a gunfight. He was that
Yes.
guy.
Yeah.
Right. So the beats are very similar. They're just I don't care.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think that there were some decisions that were made with the thing itself, not just its motivation and what it did, but also some of the visuals. Some of the visuals were interesting. Some of them were not. They did get the point that the thing doesn't care which direction is up. The whole
Mhm.
upside down with the arms and the new legs thing, that was really good, reminiscent of the '82 effects. There was, but there was also a moment. I'm trying to remember what it was. There was a moment where this movie was full of, oh my God, it could be any of us. Let's split up into pairs.
Yeah.
Into
Mhm.
pairs.
Yeah.
And my least favorite one was when the two female characters went into like the tool shed or the storage closet
Right.
or whatever. And of course, she ripped open here because
course.
hello. Of
Yeah.
course, that's where a female, the thing ripped open. Oh God,
Well,
guys,
to
come
be
on.
fair, the guy in the helicopter ripped open his chest too, but
Well, I did kind of like the fact that they had his face ripple.
Mm.
That was kind of an interesting choice. I kind of liked that, even though it was really ugh. But then they went all explodey and ruined it. But the fact that she, as the thing, the female, the woman who was copied, who was the thing, was able to get Kate on her own in a dark room in a corner by herself so easily, and then just went and attacked, and then missed.
And then missed.
But also,
After that much
scene
manipulation.
is so long that you're like, are
Mhm.
you kidding me? We're counting keys? How have you not figured out yet? You don't need to be here.
yeah,
Like,
especially
this is
after
clearly
they
a setup.
yeah, and especially after they just had a 10-minute conversation of it could be anybody.
Let's split up into pairs. Yeah, it's
But
just,
not the lone woman on this station before. Kate
Definitely
arrives.
couldn't be her.
It's-
It's never a
Yeah.
woman.
Yeah,
Well,
and
you
especially the one character who was appropriately paranoid is the one to go off by herself with someone else.
yeah. The
Well, especially
parent-
after you had already seen the tentacles be so effective, and then right, you have that scene and you're like, we've parkoured all over the storage room and you still can't grab her. Like, what happened here? Like 2
Yeah.
seconds ago, you could grab anything.
Mm-hmm.
You blew up a whole storage room like
Yeah.
outside.
well,
It was
apparently.
convenient.
Apparently, the cells of the thing are all independent thinkers, but they don't learn from each other's experiences. So
That's
the
not-
whole tentacle death across the room thing, the one in the storage closet was going, oh, I wasn't there. I don't know about that.
Right.
I'm just going to
Right.
chase her.
I have limited range of motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love how we were talking about how one of the things we love about the Carpenter one is the ambiguity, and this one decided ambiguity means we just don't have an answer, so that's okay. Because she asks him at one point, "What did you do to Lars?" "We didn't kill him." That's not an answer. That should have been her reply. It was like, "No, we
but
didn't
still
kill him
gets
because
in the
we."
vehicle with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is that answer even the
Acceptable.
beginning of an answer? It's not. It's not.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It was just
Well,
to be
guys-
cute, and it was like, and Lars has to survive because we need him for the end.
What I love about these three movies taken as a whole is everyone I know who's seen them, especially the four of us, have very strong feelings, whether they're positive or negative, about all of these movies. I love this universe that John Campbell created, that John Carpenter is the king of currently. I'm with Aubrey. I'd love to see them, give it a few years and try it again.
Carpenter
Maybe
says he has an idea for a sequel.
I
That's what
would
I'm
love it
saying.
if Carpenter would come back, because I can, the Halloween movie, some of the Halloween movies make me think that maybe he could bring some of the magic back. Maybe he could do that. If he decides not to, you have to respect that, because God, his The Thing is just
Someone
amazing.
else will.
Well, that's the
Give it a little
problem. Somebody
time.
else will. Yeah. Okay, guys. So we're way over our time. The planned thought of how long this discussion will be. I want to ask everybody, please let us know if you would like for us to have more conversation about John Carpenter's The Thing, because in my head, I've already written an hour-long panel where we just go beat by beat and just explain as much as we can explain. And at the end, we'll have a quiz and see which opinion survives that process. So let's pay the bills here. I want to start this time with Aubrey. And Aubrey, remind our audience who you are and how they can track you down on the interwebs and et cetera.
Et cetera. I am Aubrey Spivey. I am a young adult author and editor. I can be found at aubreyspivey.com or on Facebook or Instagram.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessa.
Jessa Philips. Just look for goodtobeageek.com or Good to Be a Geek on any social media platform, just about.
Excellent. Gary?
You can find me here on the Twitter. You can find me every other Thursday on YouTube and the Facebooks with the American Sci-Fi Classics track. We do a panel every 2 weeks, live 9 o'clock on Thursdays. He's been on some of them. She's been on some of them. Aubrey's going to be on some of them. And then you can find me at DragonCon in September. And you can also look for, as part of the Good to Be a Geek family, a horror podcast coming very soon.
Excellent. If you look for Darin M Bush on Amazon, you'll see my authors page. I've got about a half a dozen stories up there available for the Kindle. I'm also going to be at JordanCon next month, which is April. And then later in the year, I'm going to be at Conjuration, Monsterama, and DragonCon, and not in that order. I got that backwards, but those are the places. I'm Gary's boss today. Gary will be my boss that weekend. For some of that weekend. And we're going to be back here. I'm hoping that all three of these wonderful people will be back for later panels on tables of content. And I want to remind everybody that if we did not say something that you completely disagree with, then we're not doing our jobs. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion about 3 different interpretations of an amazing science fiction short story that everyone should read. And if you could stand these movies visually, you should absolutely watch them all, because they are amazing examples of the interpretation of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Gary have our parting shot here before we say goodbye.
Like, comment, subscribe. You
Yes.
got to remember that. You got to feed the algorithm, Darin.
That's right. We're still working the algorithm. I was thinking of some line from the movie. What's your favorite line from John Carpenter's The Thing?
Oh, you've got to be kidding. It's either that one or right at first week of winter. My friend Matt Cowger and I reply that to each other every time something weird happens for week of winter.
And I love the fact that Gary's going to get more bleeps in this 1 hour than all of the other panels
combined.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for putting up with us. Thank you to our panelists. And this is the part where we wave goodbye.
Bye.
This has been a presentation of Tables of Content. What kind of stupid name is that?